This is the Roller Coaster Podcast, and I'm your host, Lucy Q. Life is a wild ride. It has twists and turns. It's scary, exciting, and downright fun. So throw your head back, arms in the air, and come along with me for the ride.
Life is like a roller coaster, baby, baby. I wanna ride.
When Nik Sheasby asked himself if he gave a shit if he lived or died, he realized what was important to him. After nearly drinking himself into liver failure, Nik found the power to get sober. He now focuses on making beautiful ripples in the world with the Beautiful Human podcast. Hi, Nik.
Hello, how are you today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for joining me.
Of course, I'm very happy to be here.
So that's quite a stark question to have to ask yourself.
Yeah.
Between life and death. What brought you to that point? What was going on?
Well, so massive amounts of drinking was happening, and I when I tell my story, I like to start at that moment and just kind of do a little memento version of it and like take it from where I was and then just talk about how I got there. And that moment that I was speaking of in the darkest points of my life, when I was drinking incredibly heavily, I was drinking more than any human should per day than they should in a month of drinking. And I was doing that every day. And I was getting so depressed that I literally was thinking like, I just don't give a fuck if I live or die throughout this whole like darkest parts of my drinking. And it took me to a point where I flew home to my parents' house in Ohio to see my grandfather before I left for a tour that I was going out on. And I was completely jaundiced and I was put into the hospital because my liver was starting to fail. And I had to sit there and I had to think about it in that night in that hospital room. Do I care if I live? Like, is this something I want to do? And massive empowerment came through with that, where I was sitting there and I was looking at my life and I was like, what have I done in my life? Where have I gotten myself to? Am I proud of what I've done? Did I accomplish anything? And what I came up with was I was really, proud of myself that I had just lived life. I hadn't played it safe. I went for it. I took chances. And yes, I lived recklessly and got myself into a terrible situation, but I also lived a lot of life throughout that. So that's where I got to, and I'll kind of go back into my story was I didn't even drink. The crazy part is I didn't drink until I was 26. When I was younger, I was into, this was a while ago, but when the Tom Green show came out, this is a very long time ago, he was one of my
No, that's
favorites.
okay. I know Tom Green.
Yeah, it was so good. And I had that kind of attitude where I just wanted to go around and like mess with people and have a good time and just be fun and adventurous. And I grew up in a small town in Ohio, so it was one of those towns where it was like, go with your friends and create fun. So I just always had this adventurous kind of extreme brain of just like, let's do weird stuff and get in trouble and have some fun, which led into like the Jackass generation. When that show came out, I was hooked. I was one of those kids. I totally thought that I was going to be on Jackass. And my strong suit that I thought to be on this show was that I would be the sober one, because I had watched behind the scenes and knew that they drank a lot. And I was like, you know what? I'm the sober person. Even in my friend group, I was the one doing the craziest shit. And my friends who were drunk, were telling me not to do things. And I was just like, okay, well, if you all are drunk and you're telling me not to do things, I don't need to be where you're at, which is good foreshadowing to the point that I just made with my story. I didn't really trust myself because of the craziness that I was putting into my life at that point to lose control. So I didn't know that it would lead to massive alcoholism, but it just was, I was crazy enough without it, so I didn't need it. And I was always the person too, if you had known me then, I would say, I just don't need it. I don't need it to have fun. Don't need it to have a good time. I'm all good. So, flash forward a couple years, I ended up working in the music industry and I started touring, which was crazy. And by this point, I had stopped doing all these stunts and silly jackass stuff. Just I didn't have friends where I was living. I was living in Atlanta, Georgia, and it just kind of phased out of my life. I moved to a different part of my life, and then I got into the music industry, which I think a lot of people think it's just this lawless, get fucked up, have crazy parties. There's orgies everywhere, and there's drugs and booze everywhere. And I think there was a short time of that, but like truly it is a place where you can do whatever you want as long as you get your gig done, and people aren't going to tell you no, but they're also not peer pressuring. It's not when you come on a tour, they're not saying, Nick, come on, you got to go do this or you're not cool. It was nothing that way where you hear of it in high school where they're saying you got to do this or you're lame. It was just a very open environment to do what you wanted to do, and people would do it with you or not, and you just go ahead with your time. But I actually did my first 4 years of touring sober, which is a good lead up to kind of my now life. But I remember the tour that I was on when I first drank, and I had gone through some breakups, some sad songs in my story, and I was just kind of like meh, whatever about life. I was enjoying myself, but like there was something in me that I was feeling that I was missing, which was that part of the craziness that I always loved because I had always skated and done again like the jackass type stuff. And so we were in Houston, Texas on this tour, and my friends in the band that I was touring with, they were like, "So Nick, why don't you drink?" I was 26 at this point, and I told them the story that I kind of just told you, and I just said I was too crazy when I was young. I probably wouldn't have made it out, so I just don't do it. And they're like, "So you have no reason really why you don't do it? You just don't." I was like, "Yeah, no, I just don't think I'd have any control over it." And they were like, "Nah, you'll be fine. We're going to this bar tonight, which is called Dirt Bar." And their friend Sean, who's still a dear friend of mine, owns it, and they were like, "We don't pay for drinks here, so we're all here. Sean is there. We'll take care of you. Let's go and just drink and see if you like it." So it wasn't really peer pressure, but it was like, we don't have to spend a lot of money because I didn't have a lot at that point. And it was like, okay, I will do it. I decided, whatever, I'll go for it. And so that night I learned a couple things that were very detrimental to my story moving forward. Is the first thing that I learned is that I had a massive tolerance for alcohol. Somehow, without drinking ever, I had a big tolerance. I think I had double digits of shots that night, and I was drinking who knows what else, because every time I turned around, there was another drink in my hand because it was a friend's bar, and they knew I was drinking for the first time, so they wanted to have some fun with me. Second thing I learned, which is continually my problem for the rest of my life, is that I love being drunk. I loved it. The feeling, the just the feeling of being drunk, I absolutely loved it. I know a lot of people hate it. They hate being tipsy, but I remember that first time I felt my face tingle and I started to get tipsy and started to get drunk, and I just thought it was fantastic. And because of my job in the music industry, which is like VIP and merchandise, which is very forward facing, it's very crowd heavy, it's a lot of talking to people. So that had taken me from an introvert or an extrovert to an introvert pretty quickly, because when you're talking to people 5-6 hours a day with strangers, you kind of want to shell up at the end of the night. So drinking brought me back out, as it does for a lot of people. So when I started drinking, I was just having fun. I say it was my college years. I didn't go to college, so it was my time when I think people have years where they just go crazy if they're in school or whatever. So that was kind of my time to catch up, and I caught myself up very quickly. So the first few years, I was just having a lot of fun, but drinking massively. And then it just took a really dark turn. I had a relationship that I was thinking about getting off the road for, which ended abruptly, and I got cheated on. And so my mind just went really dark, and I just went far more into drinking, and relationships with parents was kind of a hard issue that has always kept me in a dark space in my mind. So all those things together just like really put me into a bad place. And so for those last, I'd say 3.5 years, I was drinking. In the States, it's called a handle. I mean, it's a bottle that, I know we're on audio, but it's a very big amount of alcohol. I should look up the ounces,
Like, are
but
you talking about a beer or are you like liquor?
liquor. Yeah, I was
Oh, so it's
drinking.
probably what we'd call, I'm in Canada, so it's probably what we call a 40 ouncer.
Yeah, yeah. I
The
think I
big,
think it's actually bigger. I think it's like
oh,
60 some ounces per. I think I'll have to look it up at some point. But I was drinking far too much for what my body was able to handle, and so I did that for like 3 solid years. So from 26 to 33, basically I was drunk every single night. I didn't take a night off because in the music industry, like I said, nobody tells you no. So if you're drinking every night, people are going to notice, but they're not going to say don't do it. They're just going to say get up and do your job tomorrow and don't complain
were you
because it's
still
on you.
getting up the next morning or severely
Yeah.
hungover or were you fine?
So as it started to get worse and worse, my drinking habit, I started to, like, when I'd roll over at night where most people would grab a drink of water, I would be taking a shot. I'd have liquor bottles lining the bunks in the tour buses that I was in, and I'd be hiding them. And um, I would wake up in the morning and I'd find whatever juice was on the bus and I'd pour like half a cup of juice and then I'd just pour rum in there and I'd start my day. I'd take a shot and
So it
I'd
was
go
like
to work.
it was continuous drinking. It wasn't
Yeah.
like, oh, it's 5 o'clock, I'm going to start drinking. It was like
No. It was like, good
if your eyes were
morning.
open, you were drinking.
Yeah. Yeah. Even if they were kind of closed and I was just rolling over, I would search for something. I remember vividly just like in my bunk having a bottle next to me and just like taking a swig. Even when I was off tour, like it was bad. And I think that was when I started to realize it and my friends started to realize it because I didn't have a place that I was living. So I was staying with friends a lot when I was off tour. And when you have that massive of a drinking habit compared to even friends who drink casually or even get drunk every night, mine was like, God damn, dude. You're drinking all the time, nonstop. And so I had a lot of people that were worried about me because they just saw my habits. But in the middle of it, you're not thinking about it. I was just constantly drunk, and that was my way of getting through. And yeah, I wasn't hearing what people were saying. I would listen to them because I wasn't going to be an asshole about it, but I was just like, I'm fine. I'm good. I had that invincibility feeling. Nothing bad can happen to me. I think we all get that in life. And so as I moved forward, yeah, that was just my daily routine. I mean, to the point where if we were going to a new state or a new city or a new country, I would know the liquor laws so that if we were going there on a Sunday, I would buy a couple extra bottles of liquor on a Saturday so I wouldn't miss out on drinking. And then like I would drink my bottles during the day, then I'd go to bars. So I mean, the amount of money I was spending, but I was like, it dominated everything I thought about was, okay, I got to prepare so I don't run out of booze. And if I did, I would just start drinking everybody else's. So it was a very detrimental habit and just chaotic. And I think that's where it got to be a filler in my life was I loved that chaos. I loved feeling that craziness. And then that was what brought it out, having these drinks all the time and just constantly being drunk. So that definitely filled that void for me, which led to me going home to Ohio. And then when my dad saw me, because I was fully jaundiced, he cried when I got into his car. And then we went to my mom's house and she saw me and she cried. And then I went to dinner with some friends and I scared his kids. And I'd known his kids for their whole lives. They call me Crazy Uncle Nick. And I showed up looking like a dying man and they'd never seen that before. And then I think that's when I realized like, holy shit, something's wrong. Then when I got back to their house, it was sort of an intervention, but more just like, you're going to the hospital right now.
Yeah.
So when I got to the hospital, the the receptionist lady was like, "I just got to tell you this: people are going to stare at you because you're the yellowest person I've ever seen."
Wow.
And she'd been in the industry for 30 plus years. And then I had a doctor in that same small town hospital tell me that same night he's not going to make it. They did all these tests and he just saw how bad my liver had gotten and basically gave me the damning news that I wouldn't make it. Um, so then I went to Cleveland. I told the doctor there, like, hey man, if you know that I'm dead and there's no coming back from this and I'm not going to make it till tomorrow, don't even put me in the hospital because I'm going to go to the airport and I'm going to fly somewhere beautiful and I'm going to go out in some beautiful movie scene and I'm not coming in. I'm not going to die here. Which he finally said, I think we can help. Let us do some tests on you. And that's when I asked for very blunt honesty from him because I was like, this is my life. And if I have completely ruined it, you need to tell me that. And so they did tests on me for 3 days, which involved that night where I found out that I gave a fuck that if I lived or
You wanted to live.
died. Yeah. And that was massive empowerment. And also, again, just that I had lived my life in a way that I had wanted to. And I took chances. I traveled. I didn't play it safe. And then after 3 days, they told me, you're getting out of the hospital, but it's not because you're good. It's because we can't do anything else for you here. So we'll check on you every month till you're either good or you're gone, and don't ever drink again. Get yourself healthy. Start eating, because I wasn't eating by the time that I was getting done with my drinking career, as I like to call it. Start eating healthy and start exercising. So that was the abridged version of my drinking career story to the night that I figured out that I did want to live.
Do you think that depression played a role in all of this? You talked about having, dark moments, problems with your parents, relationship breakups. Do you think that there was, an underlying mental illness or depression or something that led you down this path?
Yeah, definitely. I've always been a person that felt feelings more so than other people did, and I didn't know what to call that when I was a kid because where I grew up, you just don't talk about it. You just either get medicated or just learn to put it under the rug and not talk about it. So I definitely do think that it was depression that was in there. And again, being on tour, majority of the time you're away from loved ones, you're away from your close friends. You do become family with the people you're on tour with, but majority of the time you won't see them again for years. And if you do, it's because you've gotten hired by the same band and you're back out on tour. So you're constantly away from your friend group. If you have one in your hometown, from your family, you're missing weddings, you're missing friends' birthdays, you're missing all these things. So, I mean, massive amounts of loneliness, especially when you're drinking yourself. Like, I was sitting in the back lounge of buses till 5 a.m, just looking out the window into darkness, drinking myself away. So it was definitely depression was in there too, that I just had never talked about because I was very good at escaping. Like, another part of my family is we don't really fight to fix shit in the family. So it never was really something that I learned to do. Like, I do fight for my loves in life, but when it comes to being able to escape easily, I definitely learned that from my family. It was like, okay, like if I'm sad, I'll just run away from it. I'm on tour. I don't have to worry about it. I'm not there.
You can
So
disengage.
yeah, I
Yeah.
can very easily disengage, which is tough for me. It's been a tough one to get through and actually fully engage all the time and not just be like, something's hard, I'm just going to say fuck it and walk away.
What were those first steps that you took? Because obviously, they gave you this rather dismal outlook of what your future or how long your future was going to be. And obviously, they were wrong. You did something.
Yeah.
What were those first few steps and ultimately what you brought into your life to basically turn everything around and bring you to where you are?
Yeah. So I think that first step, like I've mentioned a couple times, just realizing I wanted to live was a very, very large part of it. Um, and then the first person I spoke with after I got out of the hospital was this friend of mine, Tiffany, who I grew up with, and I knew her from I've known her forever, but we kind of drifted apart in adulthood, as you do. But I got back there. I was staying in my hometown. That was a decision I made to get myself healthy. Was just like be back at mom and dad's and figure shit out. And she has never drank. She's just this amazing, amazing woman, and she just she worked at the YMCA, and she just came to me and she was like, Nick, I don't know how to help you with all the drinking stuff, but I know you have to get healthy. You have to get healthy. So here's a free membership to the Y. Come down as much as you want. I'm always here. I will support you. I will help you. I will push you. I have a cycling class at 9 a.m. on Fridays, and I will whoop your ass into shape. So come to the Y, and I can at least help with that part of it. So that was a big part. First off, just being seen as not somebody who had just completely ruined their life, but as a human that needed help. And she had a very tangible way to help me and was like, I can help you get in shape and get healthy because you need to do that. And so that was a very big first step of just being seen that way and being recognized, especially in a small town. It wasn't easy because I still looked very sick. It was very front page news, not truly, but very much so in that small
People were
community of
talking.
like, yeah, people were talking. And anytime I went out, I looked very, not
I
very healthy. So
live
people
in a
were
small
looking.
I live in a
Ex-
small town right now, so I can appreciate how
yeah,
I always say you fart and at the end of the day somebody down the street knows about it.
right.
Like
Exactly.
if that. Like
Yeah.
people know
yeah.
your business with and you're like, how the hell did you know that?
Yeah. So that was a massive step. And then my parents were both like, and you don't know what way is going to work for you moving into sobriety. Because for me, I was like, how the hell am I going to be a sober human? I've been completely drunk for 7 years. My whole identity, my work, my social life is all based around me drinking, and I don't know how to not do it. So my parents were pushing me to go into meetings or groups or to do something, and most of them they were trying to push me to were religious, and I was just like, I'm not there. That's not where I'm going to go with it. So I went to a one-on-one counselor whose name is MJ, and I found just like the most perfect woman to help me where I needed to be met in my hometown. She is, I think, in her 60s, and she's like 30 some years sober, and she's the kind of woman who has pink hair one day, green hair the other day, and she is just like the sweetest person. And I asked her one day, I said, what keeps you here? And she said, people like you. Because I know there's people here that don't fit in, that are the outcasts here, and I want to be that outcast to be here for them. And it was just truly amazing to have somebody who was just on my side, who didn't know me and just strictly wanted to see me do better. So that was the second biggest step for me, was just having that one-on-one relationship to talk to her and figure some shit out. And then because of the extreme nature of my life and how I've always lived it, I decided I was going to go back out on tour, 3 months sober, 3 months into my recovery, 3 months out of almost dying. And I went out with a very heavy partying metal band for my first go round back
Oh, you were
into.
just gonna test yourself something
I was just
fierce,
going to
weren't
go
you?
for it. Yeah. And
I think
everybody,
that goes back to the jackass spirit that you had.
yes. Yeah. And I mean, everybody except MJ and Tiffany said, you shouldn't do this. And they said, Nick, go do it. Like, if that's what you want to do, I support you. I'm here if you need me. Go for it. So I went because I was just like, if I'm not going to tour anymore, it's going to be on my terms and I have to figure it out because I don't know what else I'll do, but I'll figure it out if I get there and I can't do it. So the first night I fly to Chicago to start this tour. It was the first night I ever went back into a bar. And I go in, and this has been a home for me everywhere in the world that I've been into a bar. And I've never been in a bar in the last 7 years that I haven't barely walked out of the place. So I get there, and the first guy I meet, who is now a very dear friend of mine, his name is Alex, came up to me and he's like, "Hey man, I'm Alex. What do you want to drink?" The big question. And so I just said, "Soda water." And he goes, "Oh, you don't drink?" And I said, "I have a contradiction to that. I drink massively, therefore I cannot drink ever again." And he was like, "Okay, that's totally cool, dude." First time I'd ever heard that said to me. And he said, if it's ever too much, like, let's get the fuck out of here. We'll leave. We'll go do something else. We'll go sit on the bus and we'll chill out, or we'll just go for a walk. Whatever it may be, I'm here for you, dude. And so that was the first time I'd heard that it was cool to be sober. And so also watching the dudes who were partying so heavily, who were just like I was 3 months prior to that, I finally saw it from an outsider's side, or a sober person's side. And I wasn't judging by any means, but I was just very thankful that it wasn't me anymore, because I just saw them waking up feeling horrible, and just like the constant turmoil that was happening, and just like I knew it so well, but I was just like, I'm just really thankful that I'm not there anymore. So it really truly, that point when I was carrying them home from bars, kind of giving my karmic duty back to these humans who just needed somebody to get them home safely, because so many people had done that for me around the world. I got to do that, which was also a big learning curve for me of like, all right, I can have power in this and help people who were going through what I went through. So that was a place that most people thought I would fail and I'd start drinking again. But I went and I found the biggest power to get through it, of knowing that I can do this and I can also help with this. I had very good conversations with the guys about what I went through, and then I was just able to impart some knowledge and just kind of give a cautionary tale of my life. And then I think the biggest takeaway from it was, flash forward like a year, I decided to finally share my story. I wrote up this big write-up and I posted it on Facebook. And I was not doing it for like all the likes and claps and all of that. I was doing it just to talk to the people like me who weren't listening to anybody like I was. And there was this guy that was on the tour who was working for a different band, and we had been big party buddies on another tour that we'd worked on before. And I post this, and I had told him a little bit about my story, but not a ton. And right after I posted this Facebook post, he messaged me and he's like, "Hey dude, I just have to tell you that when I saw you on that tour working and staying sober and trying to better yourself, I had wanted to get sober for so long, and I just never knew if I could do it or not. And then I saw Nick sober, and I knew if Nick could do it, then I could do it." And he goes, "As I'm writing you, I'm just passing my 1 year sober," because that him seeing me sober on that tour gave him the strength to try it for the first time. And so the next tour he went on, he did it for the first time sober, and now he's 2 years sober. He's a few months behind me, I think around 6 months behind me. So it was just this massive strength that I had never known my story would have, of like a really good friend of mine who I hadn't seen in years saw me doing better and was like, "Well, fuck, dude, if Nick can do it, then I got this."
Yeah, you found inspiration
Yeah.
in what you were doing. And, that's always the really incredible thing, is that we don't really appreciate how far we've come
Yeah.
until somebody says to us, "Hey, look, I saw you change and it inspired me to create change."
Yeah.
And now you continue sharing,
Yeah.
with the Beautifully Human podcast.
Yeah. And that moment was exactly why I wanted to start doing it. I started it as a blog called Beautifully Human, and I would just reach out to friends because I was thinking, well, damn, I didn't know how powerful my story was. I didn't realize that me just actively trying to live and not die inspired somebody to get sober. So if I didn't know that, then I bet most people have no idea how powerful their stories are. So I would reach out to friends, and I would have a rap sheet of 20 questions. I'd send it to them, and most commonly when I'd ask people to be part of Beautifully Human blog, they would say, "Well, why me?" And I would say, "Because you. Because you have power. Your story is beautiful. Your story has power." And I laughed, I cried, I got to know my friends so well through reading their stories. And it was just really beautiful to inspire them to write their story. And then people would reach out to them and they'd be like, wow, I didn't know that I had this power. And it was just this really beautiful way to inspire others to write their own story, to just open up and be vulnerable, because we all need to do that more. The more we share, the more people learn, the more we can all grow. And so um, I had a friend who loves podcasts, and he finally was just like, dude, I read the Beautifully Human blogs all the time. Why don't you do this as a podcast? So he loves podcasts. And I was like, I just don't know anything about it. I've never done it before. I've done art in the way of photography, but I've never actually done like putting myself out as the art person, my voice being that. And then my partner and I decided, well, let's record one together, and if I like it, then I'll keep going. And so yeah, it's these conversations that I just have wanted to have because of my travels and the people that I've met, just sharing their stories from around the world. I think it's one of the best things you can do for yourself is just go explore and meet people that you think are far different than you because they're from somewhere far, far away, but you'll find out that they're not that different. And especially in my country in the last couple of years, it has been super, super divisive, very hateful, and very ignorant. So I got very annoyed seeing that, especially from like where I came from and just like the small communities. And I was like, you have never had these conversations with these people that you claim to hate or don't know anything about them. So that's always my target with my Beautifully Human podcast, is to have conversations and let people be flies on the wall, to hear stories from elsewhere in the world that you wouldn't hear because you don't go there, or you just won't have those conversations. So it's a learning opportunity for me. I'm so enriched every time I speak to somebody. I get to learn so much from every human. We can all learn so much from every single person. So it's just been this full circle, also back to that night of one, wanting to figure out if I wanted to live or not. I wasn't thinking about the money that I had in my account. I wasn't thinking about anything monetarily. I was thinking, what impact did I leave on this world? Who have I affected? Who have I done terrible things to? Those were the thoughts that I was having. I wasn't concerned if I was a billionaire, if I had 2 cents in my pocket. It didn't matter at that moment. And I was thinking to myself, if I make it through this, I have to do more for this world. I have to go out and speak to people and for people and just be a voice in the world and just spread beautiful ripples out there with whatever time I have left on this earth, because who knows how long that is for all of us. So that's my contribution at the moment, is doing this Beautifully Human podcast and sharing with people from every sexuality, identity, race, country, doesn't matter. We're all beautifully human. That includes the bullshit, that includes the
Well
fun,
said. Yeah.
your failures, your joys, your pleasures, all of it makes us beautifully human. So
And your
yeah.
podcast, it's on all the usuals, iTunes, Spotify,
Yep.
all of that. Okay, cool.
Yeah, if you search for the Beautifully Human podcast, it should be there. On most every streaming site. And yeah, it's a really cool concept of just I ask people to tell me the story of their life, and most of the time I just sit there and have some interjections and some questions, but I just let people talk, and it's really cool, the conversations that I've gotten into and what I've learned from people who have had life completely different than I have.
And if people want to hear more about your story and connect with you, what's the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, so through the Beautifully Human podcast on Instagram or Facebook, you can message me on there. My personal Instagram is a funny one. It's Tater Chips, like Tater Chips. You can always message me there, especially if you just want to hear more about my story or connect. I would love to have people reach out and just talk, because again, like we've both said, the more we share, the more we reach out, the more we can connect, the better off we can be. Even if you have somebody who's struggling and you just don't know how to help them, there's practical steps. Like me, I had to stop immediately or I would die. But there's practical steps to taking a day off, or if you start at noon, maybe drink at 5 instead of noon. Give yourself little challenges every day that are reasonable and that you can be proud of if you waited for 5 hours, or drink 2 drinks per hour if you're usually at 4. Just tangible challenges, but also, but yeah, reach out to me. I'd love to chat, connect. I love having conversations with people from everywhere. So
If you're looking at connecting with Nik, please check out the show notes. I'm going to have all of his links in there. And Nik, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your story.
you are so welcome. Thanks for having me. This has been a pleasure. I always love chatting and meeting new people. So I appreciate you giving me the space to tell my story.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Roller Coaster Podcast. Want to chat or share your ideas about today's show? Pop me an email at hello@therollercoasterpodcast.com. Don't forget to connect with me on Facebook and Instagram at The Roller Coaster Podcast. Our theme song, Roller Coaster, was performed by The Lucky Setback. Audio editing by the one and only Jeff Quigley of Quigley Creative.